Aloha friends. Today I'll be talking about Docker. So Docker is a containerized environment where you can deploy your applications. So Docker is an open source project that automates the deployment of applications inside a software container. Docker contains a wrap-up piece of software in a complete file system that contains everything it needs to run. So Docker is something which encapsulates the code, the runtime, the system tools, and system libraries. And in collection of all this, it makes an image. So in Docker world, everything which is made up of these collection, it is called a Docker image. Now, why exactly Docker came into picture? Because already we have virtual machines and shared machines which were complying the purpose and giving us an option of not provisioning entire new servers for deploying the application, because you can have one server and have 10 different virtual machines into that, and you can deploy your application in isolation over there. But the one of the biggest problem which you experience when you use a virtual machine is the amount of time the machine takes to boot, to reload, or maybe to restart. Now, this time is a bit of critical thing, because if your application is mission critical and one of the virtual machine is needed to be upscaled, it becomes a bit of problem because it'll need a reboot and it'll need a lot of challenges around that. If we use Docker, on the contrary, it becomes very easy because Docker is a very lightweight, uh, encapsulated environment, and in a Docker container can start in seconds in comparison to a virtual machine which takes minutes. Now, if we talk about why exactly should a programmer come and use a Docker container? So normally, if you are a programmer, you would have experienced different sort of issues around deployment and stuff like that. Few of the scenarios which I have experienced in my personal life, out of that, I'll just share two of the very common things which made me think about using Docker in my day-to-day application deployment. Now, if we talk about the first scenario, so this is a scenario which happened with me long back. Normally, what happens is when you start with an application development, the first thing what you do is you write the code. After writing the code, you just build it. You use a build tool or you use build on your machine. That build normally generates an artifact. That artifact, now it goes into a test environment. In the test, you just verify whether the build works as it is asked to, or whether the requirements are missed somewhere. Once the test is executed, next you do is, if everything is successful, you go and deploy the build into different environments. And once that deployment is done in production, everything is hunky-dory. Now you go for a party, you enjoy, and that's a beautiful end to the story. But in real world, that's not the end of the story. That's where the story starts. Nobody's ever tell you in any of the books about this big arrow, because this big arrow leads to a amount of time which passes after the software deployed in production. Now, once the software is available in production, it it's tackled by different people. It's used for different purpose, and what happens is after a while there may be some issues which might happen in the system, and sometimes those issues are because you had some bugs in the software which came into visualization after a while, or other time what happened is what I'm explaining in the story. So what happens is one night when you're sleeping cozy in your bed, you get a phone call. That phone call comes from a person who is just at the top of his lungs shouting at you, and you are totally unaware that why is that voice coming to you. Now, what happens is after a while, you identify that, okay, this guy is my boss, and he's talking about some issue which he's being told about an application which is running in production. It's middle of the night, it's very difficult to collect yourself, but fortunately, somehow you try to grab things, and then you get to know, okay, this is an application which I worked around a year back, and you try to pull your hairs because you don't even remember what was the requirement. But anyways, going forward, what you do is you become a ninja programmer, and you try to just sort it out. You know that it's just a programming bug which you can find anyways, and you just start looking into the code which you did long back, and you just try to just filter out what can be one of the potential reason why that application is failing. You go for that for a while, and then maybe after an hour or a few hours, you get a bit of demoralized sort of head, and you think that okay, might be this might not be a problem of the project or the software or the code, and you are just stuck in somewhere in the middle, and you are not sure whether it's a code problem or is it something related to environment and stuff like that, and you keep on looking for the problem in the project. And then after a while, or maybe a day, you get to know that some interesting fellow just went into the server and changed one of the configuration which was the holy grail for your application. And that screwed up the entire application. And the reason why he did that was his application needed that specific configuration. The most interesting part in this story is that it was not anyone's fault. The other guy who just changed the configuration was trying to sort his application, and that led to something which was totally unexpected by him as well. The other scenario which I'll talk about is again something very common. So what happens is, suppose you are like working on some project, or you got a very good idea, new idea which you think can change the world, an idea of a lifetime. That's what you call. What you do next is, once you have that idea, you say, okay, let's put it down into a software. And you start building a software on top of that idea. It takes a while before the software is completed. Once it is done, you say, now I have the world in my hand. What you do next is you just buy or hire a server. And that server, you put down your application. Once the application is up on the server in the production environment, the first thing you think of is sharing that application details to people close to you. That might be friends, families, or people around you. After they get that application details, maybe once or a while they will go there and just try to visit what the application is all about. Some people might like it, some people won't, but since they are close to you, they will share it on their social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. The interesting part is, since each one of us has such a big social network, even one person in our network, if he goes and checks the website, obviously the traffic on your application will go high, and that will be quick. Once that happens, you are you are in a condition where you have to think about, since the traffic has gone up, you have to serve more number of people. You will have to increase your server capacity, so you'll put in more server space or maybe more hardware into the server in order to sort that out. Once that is done, still, since the traffic is humongous, it becomes a bit of problem to find out what can be the realistic amount of hardware which can solve the purpose. And then what happens is most of the people start experiencing this page not found. This is something which is a nightmare for any entrepreneur. And then if this goes to the social media, you are done. Your application does not exist anymore. What you do next is, you are not left with other options, and you go back to the whiteboard and you start looking into, okay, how can we redesign the application so that we can solve the purpose. This all was bottlenecked because the servers could not be upscaled to a point where it could serve any amount of traffic. Now all this scenario are very common scenario which any developer or any entrepreneur or any project owner would experience in his lifetime. In both the scenarios where we had the server configuration changed, or in this scenario where we couldn't upscale our servers to a level that it could sort any sort of traffic, in both of these scenarios, Docker is a very crucial or very solid, rock solid solution to solve the problem. What happens in Docker is not a physical machine. It's total a configuration file. Now you run that configuration file, you get a Docker container. That container is same if you run it on your dev machine or if you run it on a production machine, the file will generate the same image. Now what that means is, whenever you compile a Docker file, that file generates an image. That image is a collection of the code, the runtime, the system tools, system libraries, or any dependency that the application relies on. It even includes the operating system, whether it's Linux, Windows, it will sort all that out. Now, once you have that image will run the same in every environment. Maybe it's a simple, very low scale dev machine, or it's a very high end production machine. So the benefit of having a Docker container is always more beneficial if you have situations where you are totally in a position where you can't predict much. If you go to docker.com website, you will get to know a huge amount of details about what Docker is, why exactly it is into market, what the aim and goal of this product is. And the best part is Docker is totally free. Till you're using it for personal use or you're using for a small amount of user group, it's totally free. But once you start creating an image which you want in your private environment, then you have to pay for it. Otherwise, it's totally free. You can use it. You can use for production ready applications. You can use for dev applications. Docker will not charge you anything. Apart from the Docker website, the other big element which Docker carries is Docker Hub. Now, what Docker Hub is, as I have been talking about the image which Docker mostly deals with, these images are pre-compiled and they are available in this Docker Hub environment, Docker Hub website. Now, if you want a ready-made, maybe a Redis cache server, or maybe a maybe a Docker container, or maybe a MySQL container, all these containers which you see over here, these are images. Now, these images, if you have a Docker install on your machine, you can anytime grab these images and then you can put your application on top of that. So it's as simple as that. You have the base image of Ubuntu or a Docker registry or a MySQL Alpine, and it's the list goes on and on. So you can download this image, and then on top of that you can put your application and it works seamless. The beauty is that you don't need to manually do the image download on your machine or on your Docker container. If you use the docker.yml file, it will just uh, read the file. The Docker will read the file, it will download the image, and it will just run your application on top of it. Also, once you have that entire package available where you have the base operating system or base platform on which your application works, and you deploy your application on top of it, once you have that image you can recreate that image, and that new image will be an application specific image. So at any time you can ship that image to anyone and he can just install it as a container in his environment, and it will run the same as it has been running on your particular machine. So what else do you have in Docker Hub? If you go on the search and you want to serve a Windows machine, so what you do is you say you Windows, and that will grab all the Windows specific images. I believe it should be um Windows Nano server. Okay, yep. So the nano servers are basically a version of Windows where you have the lightest possible window available. This servers are very useful if you are more into the .NET in core environment, or if you're using .NET lightweight environments. You can use these nano servers and install your application on top of that. Any .NET application will work seamless. So Docker container are ready-made packages sort of thing. You don't need to do much. You have, or you can, as you can see, you have mostly every sort of platform required in the Windows world over here, and you can just take your application on top of this and put it, and then it runs as is. Um, if you're using your private image, like if you have your one of these images along with your application on top of it, and if you want to put that image in the repository, you can put it in the public repository over here. But if you want to have your own private repository, you will have to create a sign in with a lot of like you need to sign in with the proper authentication, and also you need to you will be charged, basically charged for anything which you want to do private. So till you are not doing anything private, it's all free and you don't need to pay anything for that. Also, I'll give you a bit of glimpse of how you can access Docker within on your machine or on any machine which is running Docker container, how you can access what is running on it, and how you can see if Docker is available or not. So, a very easy way is if you are running on a Windows machine, just go to PowerShell. So, PowerShell makes everything easy. So you write Docker, sorry, ER PS, and that will get you any image which is running on the machine. So as for now, this machine is not running any image of Docker, so it's not showing anything. But if you see over here, you get the container ID, you get the image, what image is running on it, you get the commands. It also shows when it was created, what is the current status, and what port that particular container is listening to. And in the end, it also gives you the name. A very simple test to see how Docker images respond is like you can write a simple command which says Docker run, and any image going forward when you will be downloading on your machine or using the container, and if you will be running it, it will require this Docker run command along with the further image name or stuff like that. So a default command which you can use to test whether the Docker is working fine or not is docker run hello world, and that should give me a response back that Docker. Yep. So I got this response back which says hello from Docker. So that's the response which the Docker image, default image, is giving back. Also, you can see that what sort of version is available on your machine. So if you write Docker minus version, so that should give me Docker. So on my machine, Docker version is 17.03.1, and the build is the specific build over here. Um there is a wide range of things which you can do with Docker, and like I'm from a Microsoft background, so I do mostly .NET stuff. So in my coming videos, I'll share the details of how you can use Docker with Visual Studio and how you can deploy ASP.NET and ASP.NET Core application in a Docker container. So hopes that this video would have given you a basic overview of what Docker is and how it can help you out in your day-to-day application development and support. Going forward, I'll add on videos which will help you in identifying that what potential ways you can use your programming environment like Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code to deploy your application into any of the Docker containers. Thanks for watching this video. Have a nice day.